Hello, everybody. What's going on? Here is another game in the Alekhine Defense 4 Pawns Attack Variation. This game comes from the 36th Chess Olympiad in 2004. Um, with the white pieces is Grandmaster from Greece, Kotronias, and with the black pieces is Alexander Baburin, a longtime exponent of the Alekhine's defense. So the game started off e4, knight f6, e5, knight d5, d4, d6, c4, knight b6, f4. Here's our dreaded 4 pawns attack variation. Now Baburin plays this secondary line, which is bishop f5, which I don't particularly like. I believe that the best line is the old tried and true line of just capturing immediately um, in the center. Then after knight c6, attacking this pawn here, bishop e3, then bringing the bishop out. This line right here serves to leave more tension in the position, all right, and also, of course, there's more options by leaving tension in the position. For instance, this position could end up just being a closed position, kind of like a check Benoni or advanced French variation. But I think that since black doesn't take enough time to really break down the white center, that this can often lead to a disadvantage to white. Excuse me, to black. So in this game, knight c3 was played, e6, knight f3, bishop e7, bishop e3, castles, and now bishop d3, and now Baburin decides to play d5. Now this is already a critical moment in the game because what black wants to do is provoke white into playing a stereotypical move c5 here. And then after c5, attacking this knight, this bishop will simply exchange on d3, queen d3, and now this knight will hop into c4. And we can see that the position is taking on a closed nature. And what happens is the general rule is when the center is blocked, the pawns are blocked, then play will transfer to the flanks. So you will see play on the queen side. So either black or white will play on both sides of the board depending on where the pieces are located and where they feel they can get an advantage. So often black will try to chip away with moves like b6, etc. Sometimes even f5, f6, etc. White will try to attack on the flanks, sometimes expanding on the queen side after, of course, getting rid of this knight, and sometimes pushing on with the king side attack. So example play here could be, say, bishop f2. Right, just want you to see this idea. If bishop f2, because if you wanted to just outright protect the pawn, you could by playing bishop c1 and preserving your bishop here. But this is kind of trappy. So knight takes b2 would be meant by queen b5, and then after knight c4, then queen takes b7. All right, so the game is kind of sharpening up at this point. But instead of taking the pawn, black can just play knight c6. And after, say, queen e2, now protecting the pawn, a6, castle, and you get this kind of typical play that would occur when the game is closed. You see the chipping away at the queen side here, b3, kicking the knight out, knight d2, b5. So now, after b5, the strategy is kind of switching up where black can keep the queen side closed. Again, these are all just sample moves. And black is able to hold his own in this kind of closed position here. Right? Of course, he has to be careful as white has more space, but black can hold his own here. So a critical position is here. So after d5, right back to the game, Kotronias decided to damage the pawn structure of white. He played bishop takes f5, e takes f5, and then played c5. Okay, so instead of playing c5 right away and just allowing the exchange without damaging the pawn structure, he just decided to damage the pawn structure first and then play c5. Then after knight c4, we see the same idea here. So bishop f2 is played. Notice the pawn is still available to capture. But here, if queen b1, right, and he tries to do the same idea, it's worse here. The reason being is because after knight d7, right, protecting the rook, this pawn is left unprotected. Okay, so either queen takes d5 can be played, or just simply knight takes d5, and this is practically winning for white. So after e takes f5, c5, knight c4, bishop f2, this is why c6 is played. So now after c6, this pawn is legitimately threatened, and b3, kicking the knight out. Knight a5. So now black has the dilemma here, a problem rather, of what to do with this knight. The knight is suspiciously placed. So this usually calls for a type of plan with like b6 to try to chip away at the queen side pawns, and then also reposition this knight. So knight a5 is played, queen c2, attacking this lone pawn now. This provokes g6. Key point to remember is that white has not castled in this position. And remember what I said about block positions. The play transfers to the wings. So what that means is that white can either play in the queen side or the king side, or both. And black has the same option. Black can play on either side of the board. However, difference is black is already castled on the king side. So he has to be more cautious about playing on that side of the board. All right. And the other question is, if black does decide to play on the queen side, how far can he really, how much progress can he really make here? So this is kind of like the decisions that have to be thought of when going into these type of positions here. So h3 is played. So now we can see white has already sent the signal that he's going to just play g4 and go for this break here and attack on the queen side. Baburin, experienced player, he decides to go for his counterattack, plays b6, g4, and of course, when it comes to opposite wing attacks, usually the side that can get the initiative first is going to end up with the upper hand. So therefore, material takes on a slightly lesser value in these type of positions. So white is not really concerned about dropping a pawn in this type of position. g4 is played, and now it's a battle of nerves here. Is black going to continue on with his plan of attacking the king side, or is he going to stop what he's doing to try to prevent white's plans on the king side? So here Baburin gives in and plays f takes g4. That's usually a bad sign when you wind up playing on quote unquote your opponent's side of the board. What do I mean by your opponent's side of the board? The side of the board that the opponent has initiated the attack on. Usually you don't want to do anything that is going to open up files or facilitate his attack on that side of the board. After all, that's what he wants. So when you capture or you're forced to make a move, whether it's a defensive move or whatever, that allows your opponent to accelerate his attack, usually that's a bad sign. So in hindsight, black would rather ignore this assault with g4 and continue to play on his side of the board. B takes c5. Right? Continue on with his plans. So play, for example, could go b takes c5. Right? White ignores also and plays g takes f4. C takes, so now a piece is attacked. So this kind of forces white to deal with it. Knight takes d4. c5 again. And now his problematic position here. Now, if black forces white to just drop back with, say, knight f3 or something like that, or even knight d2, moves like d4 can be very annoying. So, for instance, knight f3, d4, and you can see what I'm saying, how black is trying to fight for initiative here. Right, knight e4, again, more attacking play, queen d5, etc., etc. All right, for an example, and we can see black has a viable game, right? The game is kind of up for grabs, going back and forth, and you see the difference there. Another idea after c5 is that instead of playing knight f3, white can even play more dynamic and play a move like f6, right? As you see, the bishop is trapped here. All right, so the capture is pretty much forced at this point, right? If c takes d4 here, um, this doesn't look too good for white. Excuse me, for black, because f takes e7, hitting the queen. So the queen has to capture. They take d5, and then there's no real way to stop this knight from getting into f6 here. So queen b7, for example. You play a move like queen e4, and after rook d8, knight f6. It looks pretty strong here, even going into an endgame. So after f6, the best move here for black is probably just a capture. But then white has a nice in-between move again, because the bishop's not really going anywhere. So he can just play this move knight f5. And one of the ideas is, if black, say, tries to preserve his bishop or something like that, maybe come back here, for example. All right, bishop h4 is very powerful. Okay, and then knight e7 is going to be very strong, followed up with the capture here. If black tries to go to e7 here, then just simply knight takes e7. Queen is now deflected off of the defense of the d5 pawn. And simple chess here. Okay, so f6 is a very, very strong move to deal with here. So best play is probably, instead of moving that bishop, again, just keep developing with knight a6. Now knight h6 check, king g7. Take the bishop. Castles. Knight b4 attacking the queen. Queen goes to d2. Again, it's all about fighting for the initiative. King takes. And now bishop takes c5. Here, again, this is just a sample line. And now there's problems on the dark squares. For instance, with this discovered check, ideas of this bishop going here, and white has a better position. So these are all the things that white and black have to think about going forward here. So after g4, black gives up on his fight for the initiative here. He kind of is intimidated by White's play, and decides that, hey, it's better to try to shut that down on the king side first. So to me, in hindsight, it's probably better for him to just go for his counterplay, although it seems white ends up better. So in the game, f takes g4 was played, h takes g4, and then he tried to shut things down with f5. Okay. Now bishop h4 was played. Now I think even stronger was just a capture here. After all, that's what white wants. Okay, it's just a capture. And then he could have played a move like knight e2, for example. Okay. Followed by bishop e3, and then castling on the queen side and continuous attack. So bishop at h4 has a direct plan of getting rid of the dark square bishop. After all, this bishop is a good defensive piece for black. Not so good of a piece for white. So this is a good net trade-off right here. However, this gives black time to pursue his initiative. So he plays bishop takes e5. And of course, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7. And now knight g5 with this attack here. And now how do you really deal with this move here? Right? There's no real adequate way to defend this pawn. So Baburin plays c takes d4, and Kotronias just simply played rook takes h7. The queen came to b4, and this is probably the move he was relying on. After all, the knight is pinned to the queen, but Kotronias just simply played king e2, and after that, Baburin resigned. So, for example, let's say if he played queen takes c3, for example, queen takes c3 would occur. Let's just capture d takes c3, and there's no stopping mate after rook h1. This formation is very primitive and simple, but it's almost unstoppable in certain situations. With the knight on g5 guarding f7 square, there's just not enough time for the king to be able to evacuate itself out. And the simple threat of rook to h8 check followed by rook h1 to h7 check is not stop. It can't be stopped by black, and this is why Baburin resigned here. So that is the game for today. I hope you enjoyed the analysis. Please leave your comments below if you want any particular variations or openings or games with a particular opening or theme for me to go over. Just let me know. I will be glad to do that. Meanwhile, please enjoy the links below. Please support my channel and donate. And also check the links below for DVDs and books related to the opening we discussed today, which is the Alekhine's defense. And we'll see you on the next video.